Why do Black voters traditionally tend to vote for the Democratic Party? It's a question that comes up every election season, with some people asking it to tell certain Black voters to switch sides and play for the other major team, Republicans. But the other way of asking the question is just as important. Why did so many Black voters leave the Republican Party at different points in history? I'm Natasha Alford for theGrio, and this is Politics Explained. After the Civil War, the Republican Party was known as the Party of Lincoln, the same Abraham Lincoln who signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, which technically ended slavery in 1865. Many Black people supported Republicans in the aftermath of the war. Once they earned the right to vote, stayed loyal. Back in the day, it was Southern Democrats who had a reputation for racism and voter suppression tactics, like poll taxes. But after Reconstruction, an era where Black folks made massive gains, then saw their rights under attack, Black loyalty to Republicans started to waver. In the early 1900s, W.E.B. Du Bois publicly criticized the Republican Party for Black people losing voting rights on the party's watch. And as more Black people moved from the South to the North during the Great Migration, Democrats started to gain more of their support through labor unions. In the 1930s, the Republican Lily White movement during the presidency of Herbert Hoover also sought to push Black people out of power and recruited anti-Black members, which created tension with Black voters. Black voters shifted even more to the Democratic Party when President Franklin Roosevelt signed the New Deal, a series of social safety net programs that helped the U.S. get out of the Great Depression, and it ended up helping a lot of Black families and providing jobs in the process. But this party realignment really took off in the 1960s, once key Democrats supported civil rights legislation to tackle segregation, racism, and discrimination that kept many Black people from the American dream. And because not everyone liked that, that's when the Republican Party's Southern strategy sought to recruit white voters who were angry about Dems being so pro-civil rights. They capitalized on racial tensions and emphasized states' rights and law and order. Meanwhile, a wave of bills, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, and the Economic Opportunity Act were all backed by Democratic leadership. Dr. Ismail White and Dr. Cheryl Laird, authors of the book Steadfast Democrats, argue that these civil rights legislative wins, quote, coalesced into the reliable Democratic voting bloc we know today. This legacy of the civil rights movement, explicit commitments to racial justice, and being a coalition of many different groups has made the Democratic Party more diverse, and that's reflected in the party leadership too. The Democrats are the party of the first Black president in American history, the first Black lawmaker to lead a congressional party, and now the first Black and South Indian woman presidential nominee. In more recent years, Democrats have also passed major legislation that has disproportionately impacted Black Americans in huge ways, such as the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, which resulted in a 40% decrease in the number of Black Americans under age 65 who were uninsured. They also signed the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act of 2012, which made lynching a federal hate crime, and the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021, which helped secure another round of stimulus checks for America. But it's not just policy wins that have translated to such a large share of Black Americans voting for Democrats. Dr. White and Dr. Laird say there is also a group social pressure that helps secure that loyalty, even though Black voters are ideologically diverse. And researchers estimate that a share of Black Democrats are actually ideologically moderate, and a smaller share are ideologically conservative. These scholars argue that group solidarity politics is a strategic choice, that there is power in sticking together and using the group's votes to make a party responsive to our issues. The fear of losing Black voters is a powerful incentive, but the prospect of gaining them is also powerful. According to the Pew Research Center, white voters are more likely than other racial or ethnic groups to associate with the Republican Party. That means that when anyone Black ascends to an elected position in the Republican Party, they certainly stand out. GOP party outreach efforts to Black communities also make headlines and so does an uptick in some Black voters willing to vote Republican in new polls. But in the era of Trumpism, even Black conservatives like Tara Setmeyer, Michael Steele, and the late Colin Powell have walked away from the Republican Party, saying it no longer represents their values with Trump at the top. A search of the official Republican platform lists promises to end woke government, defund schools teaching critical race theory, or quote, inappropriate racial content. We know Black people aren't a monolith, and for some folks, that platform might be appealing. But even with all the discourse around where Black voters are going, the numbers show that for many reasons, historical and otherwise, the Democratic Party, even with its internal differences, has maintained its edge with the majority of Black voters. So tell us, at what age did you first learn about the differences between the two big political parties? What keeps you a member of your party? What would you ask them to do? Because you only get what you ask for. This is Politics Explained with Natasha Alford on theGrio. Stick with us for the latest election 2024 coverage.